Chairman, gentlemen, before I start, I'm going to be talking about events that were about 60 years ago, when the world was a very different place, so this speech will not necessarily be a politically correct one. You are forewarned. I've said, I think Jim was 7 minutes, I think. Right, you were Squaddie. It was national service. You had to do it whether you liked it or not, unless you were physically deformed or mentally retarded. So what did I do? I went in there with a positive attitude. If you didn't have a positive attitude, you were sunk, because I met guys on demo who I joined up with. They had the most miserable time. I went in there with the attitude that they were going to teach me something. I wasn't going to waste 2 years, as it turned out it was 3. So I applied, as you were allowed to do, for 3 different units. I applied for the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, the Royal Engineers and the Signals. And I got the REME. So I became eventually a motor mechanic and latterly a diesel mechanic. When I came home, my father's car was never in the garage for the next 3 or 4 years. That's what they taught me. And if I could do it on the car today, I would, but just look at them. Now you had to do it. So you were then, well before that, everything was given a number. In the army, in the services, everything had a number. Even toilet paper. That was army form blank. That was the extent. So, sailor, name, rank and last 3.
Forgotten.
Forgotten. Gunner.
1764.
233124114. Gunner Shannon, sir.
I was going to say after this that you never ever forget your service. It's all right.
Routine boy.
That's okay. So what happened? You were shoved into a barrack room, in my case, with 28 other bods. Now they were all from different social backgrounds, different religions, different upbringings, and different standards of education. But you had to get on with them. If you didn't, you were down there. For instance, if you were on an assault course, you were having to go over the big wall, and there was a lad in your squad or platoon you knew was not going to get over that wall. He couldn't jump it. What did you do? Foot there, inside, over, and then you went over after him. Because the quality and the dependence of the squad was on the slowest and the lowest member. Like a convoy across the Atlantic during the war. All convoys went at the speed of the slowest ship in that convoy. So you had to get on with these guys. Now, you were all had nicknames. That was a great thing in our unit, in the REME. And as I was the only person north of the border, I was called Jock. Hey Jock, come on, see this man. There was a big tall lad in our unit. What was he called? Shorty. You see? And we even had a guy called Nigger Brown. I wasn't anything about it. And in one of the courses I was on, for the diesel mechanic, we had in our unit a Jamaican. His father had come over before the war, initially to be in the service of the government, but he decided to do that, and he had this son. And he was in our unit, and he was a great guy, and we all took him in. And then at the end of the course, when we were all meeting for a piss-up in the naffy, he said a very profound thing to us. He said, you know, I really appreciated my nickname, because it showed to me that you had all accepted me in our group, and I appreciate that. And I've always remembered that. Because his nickname was Snowy. Now, you couldn't get away with that today, could you? No way. So what the next thing was, after you'd qualified, and I was a fully fledged REME mechanic, you went in front of an officer and you were asked where you wanted to go. What posting do you want? Well, I think it was assumed that I would ask for the LED in Edinburgh Castle, or Dreghorn, or Redford, or Stirling, something like that. And I caused him to raise his eyebrows. And I said, yeah, the further the better, sir. And he was a bit taken aback at that. I said, well, it's logical, sir, isn't it? If I'm going to have to do it, and I'm going to get paid for it, why not see a little bit of the world? So I did. I eventually ended up in Remy Station Works up in Wasca, in the canal zone. Now I had great ideas there of going to the army had hostels, or hotels, if you wanted to call them that, in Alexandria and Cairo. And I had great ideas of going to see the 8th Army battlefields, El Alamein, Saloum, Bardia, Mersa Matruh, these places, and all that. And I'm going to see the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything. It never happened, because the Egyptians, the revolting Egyptians, decided to overthrow King Farouk. And all the military was confined to barracks, or confined to garrison in our case. However, the posting I was given was, I luckily learned, was the cushiest Remy posting overseas, because there was about 60 British Army personnel there, and we had about 1,300 wogs working for us. Now I say wogs, not again politically correct, but there were a huge mixture of nationalities. The bulk of them, of course, were Egyptians. There were some Arabs there which were quite different. There was Greeks, Turks, Italians and Germans. And the man to oversee all this was a huge man called Squaddie. He was an Italian. One day I said to Squaddie, why did you not go back to Italy after the war? And he was quite, I've started so I'll finish. He said, well, I was conscripted into the army by Mussolini and I didn't like the man anyway, so I surrendered at the first opportunity. But because he spoke so many languages, he could speak Italian, of course, Arabic, smashing of Greek, all the other one. He was used as an interpreter for interrogating Italian and German prisoners of war, because he would tell by their accents where they came from, and from that we could deduce what regiments were there and what our opposition was. And after the war, he went back to Italy. He was communist, he didn't like it, so he went back to Egypt, married, settled down, and as far as I know, spent the rest of his life there. Thank you, Jim.